All right, we want to welcome everyone to this walkthrough of the Panther Involvement Network, or PIN system. My name is Jeff Benson, and I'm the Interim Associate Director for Student Life on the Atlanta campus.
And hi, I'm Jez Katambe Lopez. I'm the Associate Director for Student Life for the 5 Perimeter campuses.
All right, so to dive right in, what we want to do is show you the Panther Involvement Network. In this training, we will kind of just give you a walk through the whole system, as well as show you specific tools that your department can utilize in order to engage with students. What you'll see right now is that we have already navigated to the Panther Involvement Network, or PIN, by going to pin.gsu.edu. You'll see it up there in the URL. What you'll see here is this is the outward-facing website for this system. So this is where folks don't have to log in. They can search, see different things that are going on. So you'll see as we scroll down here that there are public events that organizations and your departments can put into the system. You'll also see a listing of various organizations, as well as news stories where your organization has an opportunity to put in updates from your office that will be shown both publicly if you choose to, or just to students. You'll also be able to see on the top here various tabs that, again, folks can search for public events. They can search for organizations and see basic organization information for student organizations as well as departments. You can also check out those various news items. If you choose to use our forms feature and collect information from folks, you will see forms that are actually open to the public to fill out. You'd be able to create forms like that yourself. And lastly, you'll see a service tab, which is connected with our civic engagement Give Pulse system to allow students to sign up for various service engagements throughout the Atlanta and greater Atlanta area. Going back to that homepage, what we're going to do next is go ahead and sign in. You will sign in using your campus ID and password, as you'll see here. Once you log in, you'll see that the system has changed quite a bit. So the homepage now will include a lot of personalized information. So you'll see that we have announcement boxes going on, which we are using for resources per Atlanta campus, perimeter campuses, as well as university-wide resources. You'll also see a listing of the memberships of all the organizations that you are personally attached to in the system. I do serve as one of the fraternity and sorority advisors on the Atlanta campus, so you'll see a lot of Greek organizations from me. You'll also be able to see, again, more events. These will now include events that are limited to viewing only by campus. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And again, your different news stories there. So to start off, one thing we do want to make sure we address is that we do have a number of resources for folks as they get into the system, some how-to documents, as well as a really good service page. So this link right here under the Atlanta campus resources that says Panther Involvement Network Help Desk. This is the help desk of the company that actually created this software system. They have wonderful help documents for you as you get in and start utilizing your page. We also have some locally created how-tos that you'll find under the Atlanta campus resources page, as well as the Perimeter College Student Org resources page. Moving on to the next piece of this, you'll note right under here, under the university-wide resources, we do have a link to our department PIN page request form. That will ask for the basic information we need about your department in order to create you a page, and we will try to get that page created within 1 to 2 business days once the form is submitted. What we would want to do is what I want to do is show you that PIN works in sort of an interesting way as you try to navigate the system. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go to a departmental page that has been utilizing PIN very well, the leadership programs page. What you'll see right now is this, again, is the way that your page would appear to anyone who does not have any management access to the page. So you'll see basic information that you can populate. If you have photos, you can put those in, as well as what forms and events that your particular department is showing. You'll also be able to see news again, as well as any documents that you upload for students to be able to use. This is what we call the Explorer view of PIN. So the Explorer view is where you are viewing it the same way a student or anyone who doesn't have any sort of management or administrative access would see it. In order for, in this view, if you try to click on a form, if you try to click on an event, even if you have admin access to the page, it is going to treat you the same way as a general student or somebody who does not have that access. That's because we are in what's called the Explorer view. You can see the views here, so the Explorer view. In order to manage your page, you are going to want to move to the Manage Organization view. You can do that either by switching views on the top here, or you can navigate to your page and click this Manage Organization button. You'll now see that we are in the Departmental Administrative page. On this, you'll see a basic overview of who the primary contact is. This will be whichever staff member you want to have control of your page, as well as how many individual people are attached to the page. You'll also see in the menu up here the opportunity to see all of the different organization tools that you'll be able to utilize as a department in this system. We are going to do a quick walkthrough of each of these different pieces. We will start actually with the roster tool. So the roster tool is one of the more powerful pieces that PIN does allow you to do. Once you get on this page, you'll be able to see that every single person who is connected to your page. You'll also be able to see, using these tabs, folks that you have either invited or folks who have clicked on a button saying that they want to join your department. So the current roster tab that you'll see here, these are the folks who are actually currently attached to this page. Christina in leadership programs utilized a list of students who indicated during orientation that they wanted to get more information about leadership programs and invited all of those students to the page. You'll see that she has over 600 students who have accepted that invitation. Looking at this next tab for pending, these are folks who have been invited to the page but have not yet accepted that invitation. So as it loads here, you'll see that there are still a number of students, actually 2,700 students who Christina has invited to the page who have not yet accepted that invitation. Lastly is this perspective tab. This tab are students who have clicked the join button. So these are students who navigated to the departmental page and said, I want to join it. Christina is always very on top of that. So you'll see that there are no prospective members right now because she does go ahead and approve those as they come in. The next thing I wanted to show you is our positions functionality within the roster tool. So positions is an opportunity for you as a department to create classifications for the membership on your PIN roster. You will automatically have a primary contact as well as membership positions formed for your organization. Beyond that, you can create any number of positions that you would like to show folks or in order to classify the people on your roster. As you'll see here, Christina created a staff member position that I wanted to show you because this is something that a lot of you may want to do. This position is basically, you can call it a staff member. You can choose whether this would be an officer, a member, or an on-campus advisor. It is important for us to let you know that this software was originally created for student organization use. So there is going to be a number of, there's going to be a lot of language in here that are directed more towards student organizations than departments. Please don't let that stop you from utilizing the system to your full ability. It does have a lot of wonderful tools for you. What you can do once you create a position is choose whether you want it to be current and active, but you can also choose what sort of access level you would like the people who have this position to be. So since this is for staff members, Christina chose to give them full access to the Panther Involvement Network page. In other words, they can fully manage the page the same way you would be able to if you're the main contact or the primary contact for your department. The reason I wanted to show you this is that if you do have various positions doing different jobs within your department and you wanted to classify this a little bit more, you can choose to give different positions limited access, which means that you give them access to these specific functions. So let's say that you have a graduate assistant working in your office who's in charge of creating events for your organization. You may choose that you don't want them to have full access to your Panther Involvement Network page, but you do want to give them access to events so that they can create and share events on the page. You also may want to give them, if they are doing this, an opportunity to send messages so that folks on your roster understand that these events are happening. Maybe give them forms as well, because you're going to collect information from the people who attended your events and you want them to be able to do that. As you see, there are a lot of different options you can do there. I am going to go ahead and cancel the changes that I made just because I don't want to mess up Christina's page as we do this demo. But you can also create other positions for yourself. So let's say that you have a number of students on here and you want to classify them based on the date that they, or the semester that they joined your portal. You can actually create a position that says, you know, fall of 2020. If you do that, you would probably say that I want them to be members and that you don't want to give them access. Once you create a position, and again, I'm going to cancel this so I don't mess up Christina's portal. But once you have positions created on this main roster page, which I just navigated back to, you can assign positions by going to the individual folks in your roster, clicking this little pencil icon and saying what they are part of. So let's say that this first person is a staff member, you would click that and hit save. And that person would now have all of those rights and privileges that you have associated with that position. The next functionality we wanted to talk to you about is actually how you get people onto your roster. So what you can do for that is easily use this invite tool. You would click on the invite people box, and what you would do then is just enter in the Georgia State email addresses for anyone that you wanted to add to the page. I'll put my email address in just so you can see the functionality of that. Once you have these emails in, and as you can see, you can add up to 500 email addresses each time. You would click on the add email addresses button, and then you would be able to actually choose how you want to invite them into the portal. So you can choose to have them as a member or any of the different contacts that you, or any of the different positions that you created. So once you get your pin page, if you don't have one already, one of the best things to do immediately is put all of your staff email addresses in here. If you created that staff member position, go ahead and invite them as a staff member and send the invitation. One thing to note about the way that the Panther Involvement Network works is that in order to have people added to your roster, you need to invite them and they need to accept that invitation. Likewise, if they click a join button, you need to accept them as members. It is a two-tiered process. Both parties have to agree. It is important that you realize that because as you saw with the pending tab here that Christina used, she has invited a lot of students who have not taken that additional step of joining the page. So one thing that we do recommend is that if you do have a personal relationship with any of the folks that you are inviting to your page, it's always good to send an additional email to them just saying, hey, I invited you to join our departmental page. You will need to log into PIN to accept that invitation. The last piece of this tool we wanted to show you is the messaging tool. This is one of the reasons why you would want to easily add a lot of folks to your page. The messaging tool is a great opportunity for you to be able to send emails to every single person on your page. The email automatically goes to their campus email address, and it gives a great opportunity for you to not have to manage other distribution lists. You can just manage your roster on PIN. In order to create a message, what you're going to do is use this create relay button. And essentially what the system does is it will create a distribution list to send to whoever you choose to send to. So what you'll be able to do is select your recipients either by positions or by individual memberships. We're going to do positions because that just makes the most sense. So let's say you have a big event coming up for your department and you want everyone on your page to know about it. You would be able to go ahead and click member here and choose close. Once you do that, you'll be able to see right here how many recipients your email is going to go to. So with this one, it is going to go to 600 people. You would go ahead and put your subject line in here. So for this, we're going to say, check out our big event tomorrow. And we're going to go ahead and click this generate button. The cool part about this is this does not send an email. It basically, again, creates a distribution list. So what you'll see here is the address that you want to send the email to, and you'll also see that this is a temporary address. Basically, anytime that you want to send a mass email, you do need to create a new relay per email. Each relay is only good for one email, and you'll also see that it does have an expiration date, usually 24 hours from the time that you create it. So in order to send this email out to everyone, what you would end up doing is creating an email in whatever email system you want to use. I use Outlook, so you'll see here the Outlook window. You would then go ahead and copy the address that you see here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then just paste that in the to line. Now I can compose my email, I can add attachments, I can use any sort of rich text I'd want. And if I hit send, that email is now going to go to the 639 people that were on this relay list. I am not going to send this one out because, again, we are doing this as a demo and I don't want to send this to all of those folks. They will receive an email then from the Panther Involvement Network with your message in it. So that is just one great way to be able to, again, work with all the students or everyone in your page. One other piece I do want to point out in the messaging center is that there is text messaging opportunities here as well. Unfortunately, we do not have any way of putting students' cell phone numbers and carriers into the system automatically. So what we have found is that most students do not do that, and therefore the text messaging service here really does not do a lot of good for you. So when you do messaging, I would avoid doing anything for text and rely solely on email. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and navigate ourselves back to, again, our main menu here. And Jez is going to talk to you about our events functionality.
Hey there, folks. So it's super convenient that we were talking about sending that message out to promote our big event tomorrow. But before we send that message, we want to make sure we actually have a big event in PIN to promote. So creating events in PIN is actually very easy. From your management view, you're going to start with events. And we'll click through here. Once it loads, we'll see this blue button over in the corner that says create event. So here you can see a listing of all of the many events that have already been created and hosted by the Leadership Programs group. But we want to create a new one. So we're going to start by clicking that blue button and start up here with our event title. So we'll give our program a name. And the next step is that we want to select a theme. Now this theme is important because it actually will allow us to have certain default functions once our event is created. For example, if I don't have a specific image to use to promote my event, PIN will choose a default image related to the theme that we've chosen. So our themes are arts and music, athletics, cultural, fundraising, group business, learning, service, social, and spirituality. So my event for tomorrow is going to be a learning event. Next up, we're going to put in a description of our event. This description can be short, it can be lengthy. It can be whatever information or instructions you might have for how people can access your event. Or it can just be a really quick, come to our event tomorrow with the date, time, and location, just to promote it out to students. So we're going to add some content here. So this is just a sample that we're creating. We're not actually going to save it. So we'll just add it right in. So we'll add our event details here. Next, we can add any potential co-hosts. This is a really cool function when you're collaborating with other departments, clubs, and organizations, or other areas within the university, because if they also have a pin page, we can allow them to co-host the event with us. And that will give our co-hosts access to some of the information about our event, and will also show that event to members of their roster as well as members of our roster. So this event is going to be co-hosted by Spotlight Programs. So I'm going to type in Spotlight and select them to add them as a co-host. And you'll see they got populated at the bottom of the screen. If we wanted to add multiple co-hosts, we can. So perhaps we're going to co-host with two groups, Panther Activities Council and Spotlight Programs Board. Now these groups have been added as co-hosts for our event, and we can move on to select our information for the program. So we'll add in our date, time, and location. We already talked about this being our big event tomorrow, and we're going to run it from 1 to 2. So we can select our time and add in whatever time we need it to begin or end at. Now, PIN offers default times in 15-minute increments so that you have a little bit more control over when your event starts, especially if you're trying to time it in conjunction with a class or another program. We also have two options for locations. We can add a physical location, and I find it helpful to choose not to add a map if it's an on-campus location. For events that are happening off-campus or events that you're expecting non-students, faculty, and staff to attend, so members of the general public, it might be helpful to have that map. I'm going to choose no map this time around, and I'm going to add my location as online. So it will pull up, if you have a filed address, it'll actually pull up the address and allow you to use that location. We're going to use our online location because it's not a physical location. So we'll go ahead and save that, and now we're going to move on to add our online location. This is a fun new tool that PIN has added. So we can add instructions for how our attendees can join our online program. So for this one, we're going to invite people to join us on Microsoft Teams. And we'll have them use the link below. Now we can put in our link. Let's say it is student organizations. And we can save our link. Now, this will show up as the online location for our event, and folks will be able to click through this link. One of the other cool features is that we can add multiple dates if there are repeats of the event. So if this event is happening every Friday, we can actually select another day and add that new date. It's still going to be 1 to 2 p.m., but now we're adding Friday, April 3rd. Our location will be the same, but we'll have to add that in every time. So since we're not actually going to create this event, we aren't going to worry about saving this. Now, we need to decide who is able to see our event. And we have a couple of options there. We have the public, students and staff at PIN, members of the hosting organizations. That means that it's only visible to student leadership, Spotlight Programs Board, and Panther Activities Council, because those are the groups that are co-hosting this program. Or we can restrict it to only people who receive the invitation. I want this event to be visible to students and staff, so I'm going to choose that option. And the next part of this is going to allow me to track the attendance, because we all want to get a good idea of who is actually coming to our events or taking part in our programs. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on how to access that information in our next module of PIN. So we're going to allow attendance to be tracked on the co-curricular transcript. That's how we can make sure that attendance is getting tracked somewhere in PIN. And for this program, I want to allow anybody who attends to self-report their attendance so that they can go to the event and click the button to say, I attended. Next, we need to choose our categories. You can choose multiple categories for a given program. If a program is being hosted at a specific campus, it's very helpful to make sure that that campus is selected so that students who are looking for a particular activity on campus can find it based on the campus that they're going to. So if I wanted to choose Atlanta campus and perhaps also the Clarkston campus, it will show up at both of those locations. I can also choose to have learning categories. So for example, this is going to be a workshop on group values under leadership. And it is also going to be an educational program. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing, so I can go back and delete it and make those adjustments anytime. So it'll be an educational program, and I can also choose perks. The most common perks are free food, giveaways, and extra credit for a class. I may have partnered with a faculty member to offer extra credit for a specific class at this program. So I'm going to add credit, but I'm also going to be offering donuts. So I'll add free food. And those are helpful ways that folks can filter events when they're searching for something to do. If they're looking for extra credit, they can actually search for events that offer extra credit, and it'll help to promote your event to people who are actively looking for the kinds of things you're offering. Next, we need to decide who has the ability to attend this event. I want this event to be open to students and faculty and staff, but because this is just going to be a workshop for students and staff and faculty, I don't want to invite the general public. If I choose the general public, that's something that will actually show up on my PIN event when I open it up, so that it'll indicate who's able to come. Now, we also want to make sure that we answer the important questions about how the event is supported and whether there is a cost. For example, this is free for students, but $10 for guests. The event can either be supported by student activity fees or not. If any element of the event is funded through a student activity fee council, we need to indicate yes. This helps us to filter events on the back end when we're trying to see how our student activity fees have been used and the kinds of opportunities and resources that we've provided to students using their fee money. Finally, if we are going to offer accessibility resources, we want to indicate who they should contact to have access to accessibility. So I can type in a particular contact person. So perhaps I want them to contact Access Services at their phone number. Then I will choose the next icon to allow me to move forward. This is where I can decide whether or not people can RSVP to my event. Some events you may want to restrict to RSVP only so that you have a head count prior to the event, or you may have limited space and need to count your RSVPs against the number of seats available in a given workshop. For this event, I'm going to allow anyone to RSVP, and I'm also going to limit the number of available RSVP slots because I know that my workshop online will be really hard to manage if we have more than 30 people in the online workshop. I can choose to show how many slots are still available to the public when they're going to RSVP. This can be helpful based on the context of your event. Sometimes you don't want to show that, and you want to be able to just keep your RSVPs tracked, and it'll no longer accept new RSVPs once you've reached your number. I want to go ahead and show this because I think it will help to drive people to RSVP in advance if they see that there's limited seats available. Now, this particular event, remember, we're charging $10 for guests, so I'm going to allow guests, and we can restrict the number of guests. So I only want to have one guest per student, and my guests have to count against the remaining RSVP slots. Next, we have the option to allow attendees to represent an organization. This can be really helpful if you are trying to host a program for clubs or university departments, where when they RSVP, the individual can select from any group that they're a member of which organization they are actively representing at your program. So I'm going to allow respondents to RSVP with their organization, but I'm not going to require it. I just want folks to know that they can represent their organization for this particular activity, but they can come even if they're not a part of an organization. We can also add custom questions to our RSVP. For example, I'm going to add a question to ask folks which campus they are representing. So I'll click Add Question, and here I can enter my question text. Now, I'm not going to list all of the campuses because this program was going to be restricted to Atlanta, Clarkston, and Newton. So we can see a preview of what the campus, the question will be looking like, so that we can make sure that it's correct, everything looks right. And I want this question to be required. Everybody needs to tell me which campus they're representing. You can require questions or not require them as needed. And you can add an unlimited number of questions to your RSVP. We strongly suggest that you keep your RSVP questions to 6 or less, just to make sure that folks don't stop partway through. Good survey suggestions there. I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. And now we have an option to allow our attendees to rate the event afterwards. So after our event ends, they're going to get an email if they indicated that they attended, inviting them to give us a rating. So it's a star rating based on 1 to 5 stars, and we'll be able to start tracking how well we did on our events that way. I'd like to see what they thought of my workshop, so I'm going to check that box. We'll go ahead and hit Next, and this is where we can choose to upload an image. Now, I don't have an image that I want to upload for this event, but if I did, you can click on the image here and select a file from your computer to upload. Now, PIN does have some restricted dimensions. Specifically, it should be a minimum of 1300 by 780 pixels. And a horizontal orientation. Everything will get cropped to fit, and you can actually use the sliders to crop and adjust your image. It will always be a rectangular image with a 1.67 to 1 aspect ratio. Don't worry about that. You can upload your image and adjust the frame to fit. Just know that your image will get cropped if it's too big, and it'll get zoomed in on if it's too small. If you don't have a custom image for your event, that's okay. You don't have to select an image for this. We're going to skip it. And remember, when we selected our categories at the beginning, we'll now have a default image that represents the category of learning for our program. Now, I don't have any additional custom fields that I'm going to add to this event, but you can do that in order to add additional questions or data tracking, or to include a workflow where the event needs to be sent to a reviewer before it gets posted. I'm going to complete my submission, but because this is just an example, I'm not actually going to click complete because I don't want to mess with the events on the Leadership Program's website. So I'm actually just going to cancel out of that. And next I'm going to go back to show you what events look like when we need to manage them. So after I've completed my event and everyone has attended or reported their attendance, I want to go to my Manage view, so that I can pull up some of my existing events. So I'm going to look for my group, Leadership Programs. And here I am. So once again, we're going to look at our Management Action Center. And now I'm going to go down to choose my events. And it'll take us back to that list of pre-existing events that we have already hosted. So I'm going to choose one of the events. Let's say I'm going to choose the Strengths and True Colors presentation. So I can click on that event and it's going to take me to the event management view. This is where I can manage or change details. And remember I mentioned those default images that will show up if you don't have a custom image? This is one of the default images for learning. So they're all kind of toned out and they have specific color tones associated to their theme. Now, if I wanted to change the details of my event, for example, I needed to change the date, I'm going to go ahead and click on Change Details. And that'll take me to the editing screen as though I was creating a new event. Now, I'm not actually going to change the details on this event, but all of these fields are editable. So once you edit those fields, you're going to continue clicking through next until you get to the complete submission section, and that will update all of the content for your event that you have changed. But we're going to go ahead and go back to our event. And I also have the option, if I needed to cancel the event. I'm not going to click on that because that will actually ask me to confirm whether I want to cancel the event, and we don't want to mess with that just yet. So you can also see the event rating box here. Now, this particular event did not utilize the event ratings function. We can also see at a glance all of the event details for our program, whether or not it has been approved for posting, who is able to see the event, and whether or not we had an RSVP setup. The other thing that we can see is right here under event attendance, we'll see who our invitees are, how many of them there were, and how many individuals attended our event. Below that, we can also see an expanded report of our event ratings, and if we had assigned some extra details under those custom fields, we'll also have some of those custom options here. We're not going to get into all of that just yet. That is a whole section by itself. But I do want you to take a look at what the attendance tracking looks like. So we're going to go ahead and click Track Attendance because there are a couple of really cool features that you can use not just to track attendance, but to report your attendance. So I can see 410 people attended this particular program. That's fantastic. That's people who have already been confirmed as attendees. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can track the attendance for a given program. The first one that we're going to look at is the check-in function. Now, every user in PIN gets their own custom check-in. And to access that, I'm going to click on my profile image right up here at the top. And you see where it says Event Pass? We'll click on Event Pass, and it's going to pull up my own custom personal QR code. Now, this QR code is generated and specific to me. I don't share it with anybody else, and I can hold that up at any event where they are using the check-in app to scan into an event quickly and easily. The check-in app is 100% free. It is available on the Google Play Store and in iTunes, so that we can use that app for any of our clubs and organizations to scan folks into events. Our departments will have access to use it as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of my QR code. But just before I do, a quick note, I can actually save this to my Apple Wallet or to Google Pay to save it, and I'll have access to it anytime I need it in order to check into an event. So I don't have to sign into PIN every single time. Now, back at my event, if I've used the QR code and the check-in app to scan people into the event, all of that attendance will be recorded under my 410 recorded attendees. The other option that I have is that I can manually add attendees. And there's two ways that I can do that. The first one is using this swipe page. I'm going to go ahead and open this in a new tab so that we can take a look at it together. So if I use the swipe page, I can manually enter a Panther ID number. I've made up a completely random number here, and I can click submit to add this Panther ID number to our attendance tracker. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to mess with the attendance report that's already in existence for this event. But once I click submit, it'll actually show me either successful or unsuccessful. Successful means that this student is registered and active in PIN, and that PIN found their ID number and they've been added to the event. unsuccessful can mean a couple of different things. One could mean that you're not connected to the internet, and so PIN can't check. It'll still record the Panther ID number, but it won't be able to verify whether they are enrolled right away. So you will have to make sure you're connected to the network in order to run that. The other thing that it could mean is that they're not actively registered in PIN. If you start seeing a lot of unsuccessful notices when you're checking people into an event, it's a pretty good indicator that either they are not students and you're checking people in without a number, or that you're not connected to the internet. So make sure that your connection is strong. If you are having trouble accessing that or using that function, you can also open a blank Excel document, put your cursor in the top right side, top left side, and record those ID numbers either manually or using a card swiper. There are limited card swipers that are available to our student organizations specifically for checkout, but your department can also purchase a card swiper. Now, I will tell you that many of the card swipers that are currently available are not necessarily set up to pull Panther ID numbers directly from our ID cards. And so if you're going to use a card swiper, I strongly advise that you use the Excel function and swipe ID numbers directly into an Excel file. You can then save it and upload that once you've cleaned up the Panther ID numbers. We can offer some support and assistance through the student organizations office or your campus student life office if you're struggling with how to clean up those Panther ID numbers, because some card readers do have a little bit of trouble picking up the correct information and setting it up in a format that PIN can read. We're happy to help you walk through that. If you need to set up an Excel file, reach out to your campus student life office or to the student organizations office at studentorganizations@gsu.edu, and we'll be happy to help you out. So I'm going to go ahead and navigate away from this access code section. And the final space that I can use is I can actually manually upload those Excel files to PIN using a file upload. Once they've been cleaned up and set up correctly. I just want to make sure that I'm indicating whether I'm using an email address or an ID card number. The other thing that I can do is I can manually enter those ID numbers by hand, line by line, or copy and paste them in. I'm not going to be tracking my attendance manually for this event, so I'm not going to add anything in. But the other function that I have is that I can export my attendance, and this will create an Excel file that has the information for all of your attendees. And you'll see that it actually provides quite a bit of information, from Panther ID numbers, name and email address, to some basic registration information so that we know whether or not they are a currently enrolled student, or it'll indicate unregistered user for a non-enrolled student. That information can actually be checked against Argos reports, and we're working on some ways to connect it with the data warehouse for even more robust reporting. So that is not just event creation, but tracking attendance and reporting attendance, getting my data back out, and figuring out what I want to do with it. The next part of our department page that we want to look at is Forms. Forms is actually a really powerful and robust tool that we can use to create all kinds of surveys, applications, information collection for our departmental page or for a student organization. So you can see that the leadership programs page has already created quite a few forms for different purposes. Now, if I wanted to create a form, I'm just going to click on this Create Form button, and it'll start me out with the form creation tool. So similar to creating an event, we're going to give everything a name. So we're going to have our sample form, and we're going to go through and set up how active our sample form is. We can set it to have an active open window with a specific start and end time. So if we wanted this to be open for a month, we could start it today at noon, Or if we wanted to, we can change it and have it run for as long or as short as we want. So I want this to be open all the way till August 31st. And I want it to close at midnight on August 31st. Now, we can set up a bunch of different layers of approval or review. There's two different types of approval. One is the enable review process, approval process. Now that means that someone has to manually go to the submission and either approve or deny the submission. That's helpful when you have applications or requests that need to be reviewed for your department. Perhaps you have resources that can be checked out and you want to use this form for folks to request those resources. That's an opportunity where you might want to keep that review and approval process active so that there's an active approval or denial happening. And you can set up your workflow for who the approvers are and how those documents can get reviewed and approved by your department. The other option is no review required. That's helpful if you are simply collecting information that you want to then export for review later. This can be useful for general surveys or for applications that are simply being collected for a given role. Perhaps it's for the collection for a scholarship that you offer that you want to start collecting information on. All of that information does not need to be approved necessarily. Those are things that I might want to just automatically review. I can also set up my forms so that I receive a notification every time one is completed, whether or not it has approval or review in the process. I can choose to allow submissions from public users. This can be helpful if I'm collecting information where I want people to be able to submit ideas or resources to my department or my organization. And I can ask to collect personal information, such as a name and email address specifically. I do strongly suggest that if you are collecting information from public users, that you at least collect an email address. But for this particular form, I'm going to only collect information from current PIN users, that's students, faculty, and staff. And I'm going to give them the option to submit multiple times. That means that everyone can submit as many iterations of this form as they want. If you want to restrict submissions to only one submission, you can certainly uncheck that box to allow people to only submit one form. This can be really helpful for applications or surveys, but the forms tool is a very powerful tool that can be used for dozens of different applications. It works very similar to Qualtrics or to Google Forms, where you can create some basic form logic to allow you to manage what page a given question takes someone to as they're creating their form submission. So I also have the opportunity to identify reviewers. I can identify the reviewers for the form, or I can allow submitters to identify reviewers. For example, if a form that I've set up requires supervisor approval before I will consider it, then I can allow my submitters to select their supervisor as a reviewer. I can even require that they add their supervisor as a reviewer. I'm going to add a note here that I want them to have their supervisor review it. So they'll have to manually enter the name and email address of their supervisor for this form. Or I can leave it so that it only goes directly to my PIN team. Now, once we've created our basic information for our form, the last step is we can decide who has access to it. Maybe this is just for people who are members of leadership programs. Or alternatively, maybe this is a form that is available to everyone because I want to do a general survey and allow people to submit and collect information. So once we've created our basic form information, then we can move on to adding questions. Now, adding questions is very broad and allows us to use a lot of the functions similar to a Qualtrics survey or to a Google form. Now, remember, we're not actually going to create this form. So we're going to go through all the steps up until we create it. Now, I can choose many different types of questions, whether it's a checklist, radio buttons to allow people to select one, to select many, text fields, drop downs. I can reorder and reorganize the questions in this form any way that I want up until I've created the final document. So we can add tons of questions. There is no limit to the number of questions or the number of pages that you create on your form. But of course, we want you to make sure that you use good survey collection or data collection processes. So we also want to remind you that you can use form logic for our form to redirect questions as needed. So I can add multiple pages. For example, if I want people to choose what campus they come from, and we'll choose from a variety of campuses. Remember to put one answer per line when you create those checkboxes. And I can decide that after they've answered this question, I'm going to add a new page. And this page is only going to be for individuals who chose the Atlanta question or the Atlanta answer to their question. So we're going to choose under our page properties the kinds of conditions where we'll be able to see this page. So we're going to call this Atlanta only. And we're going to give people the option to go backwards on our form just in case they chose Atlanta when they really meant Alpharetta. So now we can set conditions, adding a condition, and then selecting the question, which campus do you attend? We can choose if it is the answer selected or not selected. So in this case, I want to choose this page to show up anytime someone chooses the Atlanta campus as their answer. We'll go ahead and set OK. And now this page will only show up in the event that someone chooses to say that they attend the Atlanta campus as their primary campus. So once we're done creating questions and adding form logic to our form, we're going to go back to our form properties. And this will allow us to review our form before we set it live. It will allow us to make our form active. That means that it is ready to be viewed and can be seen. We can choose to hide it so that it doesn't show up when folks are exploring forms, or we can choose it to be featured if this is a primary function of one of our forms within our group. We can also assign reviewers to our organization's form. So here, I'm going to assign myself as a reviewer. Now, it'll show up if I am a member of the group. If I'm not a member of the group, then I won't show up as a selectable reviewer. I'm going to choose another individual to review my form. I can add a reviewer to the form, or I can leave the form without direct reviewers. One of the steps that we have is that once we've added reviewers, they can get a notification about the form anytime it is completed. Now, we're not actually completing this form, so we're going to go ahead and back out of it. Now, one of the other things that we wanted to show you is under your Action Center, you have access to a super cool news feature. This functions kind of like managing articles on a blog or a website, where I can create articles for the members of my group. It can direct them to complete a form. It can direct them to come to an event. These are things that show up on my organization's home page. So if I'm looking at my organization in the Explorer view, these news stories will actually show up down here on my organization's homepage. So I can see the Spring 2020 online plan that was posted yesterday. And you have tons of opportunities to create as many news articles as you need. It will always show the most recent news article first. You can also use this to show easy announcements, as well as event promotion to your organization or your department. And that can be done by creating a new article. So anytime we want to create an article, it looks pretty similar to our event page. We'll add a title for our article, a short summary, 1 sentence or less, and you're limited to 250 characters. So think of it as half a tweet. Now, if I have a custom image or a photo from the event that I want to use to promote my article, it's a great place to put it. If you don't, it will show up as just a generic icon of a news article. Now, then I can copy and paste or directly type the body of my article, and you do have some formatting options to add bulleted lists, outlines, and some very basic formatting like bold, underline, and italics. You can also create links. If I click on the link function, it'll give me the opportunity to type in what I want the link to say, as well as the place that I want the link to direct to. Finally, I have the option to notify all of the members of my organization that a new news article was posted. This is really helpful if we have an important announcement or a major event that we want to make sure everyone who is a member of my organization is aware of. So I can click that and it will send an automatic notification from Panther Involvement Network to every member of my organization. I can caption my image. This is super helpful for accessibility purposes, especially for folks that use screen readers, so that we know what the image actually shows. Finally, I can decide who can see my news article. Is it visible to the general public, to folks at my institution, or only to members of my organization? Finally, we can also decide that it's a private news article, meaning that it's not visible to anybody. Now, we're not actually going to create our news article, so we're going to go ahead and close out of that. And the last area that I wanted to walk you through is, as we're managing our organization, I wanted to show you some of the resources that we have under our documents library. The documents library is a great tool where you can add files or functions for the users of your organization. So you can create folders and categorize your documents under folders, or you can create files directly. Now, what that looks like for a user who's just browsing as a regular member is that if we scroll down on our page, we can come to the documents section. Now, this allows them to download PDFs or Word documents that can be helpful resources. This might be a handbook, training tools, an application file. Any document that could be useful can be created and added to your library, and you can organize your library in these folders. So we can choose to add a folder, and it'll prompt us to give our folder a title. Then we can decide who can see them, whether it's the public, anyone on the campus, anyone in our organization, or only specific positions in our organization. When we select any of these, it will prompt us to decide what positions we want to restrict it to, or it will keep it open to the groups that we have indicated. Now, I'm not actually going to create this folder. The other thing that I can do is add a direct file. A direct file needs to be given a title and a type. So our types can be a constitution or bylaws that applies to our student organization, a default type of document. That just means a general document that doesn't fall under either a constitution or an organizing document. Organizing documents are applicable to some of our non-member organizations. As a department, you would simply use the default file type. We'll give our file a title, and then we can choose a file from our computer. It works just like choosing a file to upload to an email as an attachment. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this because I'm not actually uploading any kind of files. Once I upload those files, it will show up in my documents section. And finally, the last place that I want to show you is your photo gallery. So I can navigate to that through my Manager Action Center by selecting Gallery. And I can create albums based on different activities, events, programs, or other needs. Your department might have a career fair that you want to upload photos from. So we can create an album for our career fair, give it a name, give it a description, and decide who has access to view that. Depending on the needs of your department, that might be publicly visible. It might just be students, faculty, and staff, or possibly just people in your organization. Remember, if you choose private, that cannot be viewed except by your managers in your department's page on PIN. So anyone with management access would be able to see a private album. So we can go back to our gallery, and I'm just going to show you very briefly. This is what your gallery can look like when you're needing to upload or edit photos. So it'll show when the album was created, and it'll allow me to edit the album. So I can add photos to it, change the name, description, the visibility. Down here, I have the option to add my photos, manage my photos. I can actually click on the action stack over here to edit a given photo or delete a photo from my album one at a time, or I can delete the entire album. But I'm not going to do that because I love this album and I want it to stay on my page. Now, we can also see from the regular member view where our photos show up. So our photo gallery will show up right here in the upper right-hand side of our page. It'll show the 4 most recent photos that you have uploaded. And it'll also have a link so that I can view all of the photos. This will let me see everything, every album that I have made visible to my organization, or if I'm a public user, it'll allow me to see anything that has been set as publicly viewable. All right, so that is your overview of using your photo gallery, using forms, documents to create your library, creating your pin page, creating events, and the general ins and outs of the daily use of Panther Involvement Network. Now, there are many other functions and features that you can explore within your page. We ask that you treat your pages as though they're your own. Explore them, and if you have questions for us, please don't hesitate to reach out to student organizations at gsu.edu. We are so happy that you're thinking of creating your pin page, and we can't wait to see you and your department or your organization taking a more active role on Panther Involvement Network as a cool way to get more engaged with our students.
Thank you all for your time and attention today. Jez, wonderful job presenting, and I hope that you all will utilize PIN to help your department engage students even more. Have a wonderful
Right back at you, and we hope that you guys have a great rest of your day.